All hail the victors, all hail Michigan, and all hail Jim Harbaugh. Let's talk about that national championship. But before we begin, if you are new here, well, welcome on into the channel. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host based in Houston, and I talk college football daily. So if this is the type of content you enjoy and you never want to stop talking about college football simply because the clock has struck zero on the 2023 season, this is the channel made for you. We got a ton of stuff planned during the offseason part. We're going to be going through recaps of 2023, a preview looking into 2024, news around the transfer portal. So if this is what you're looking for, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. We're going to start doing live shows. We added in a banner. I told you it was coming. So make sure that you follow me. Make sure that you follow this channel. Continue to tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, and everyone in college football about this channel because we are in the race to become the #1 show talking college football daily. Go ahead and follow me on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. That way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. Okay, so let's just knock this out of the way. I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong. There, I said it. I predicted that Michigan at the start of the year was actually going to win the national title. But I am not one of these people who is going to go back and then say, well, remember when I said this a couple months ago, but then I changed my opinion, but I still said it. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to stick to my guns. I picked Washington to win this game, even though at the start of the year, I did believe that Michigan was going to win the national title. But I'm not going to hold on to it. I was wrong in this matchup. Michigan walks away victorious with their first national championship win since 1997, 34-13 victory over the Huskies down at NRG Stadium. And this game was a palindrome. For those of you that don't know what that word means, it's when a word is spelled forwards and backwards, like race car. You see the exact same things unfold. And that's kind of how this game went. And we'll go into more details about what happened for Michigan, what went wrong for Washington. I just want to get a quick baseline out about what happened in tonight's performance. The palindrome syndrome was simply put. Michigan came out guns a-blazing. Michigan stalled. You saw a little bit of inertia coming from Washington. They started to pick up a little bit of steam. And then at the very end, everything went right back to Michigan, and it was clear, cut and point dry. They were the better team. This was a matchup to where I thought for sure if Washington could come out swinging early, they would be able to set the tone. But the one thing that worried me in this game was the physicality of that defensive line. Listen, I don't mean to take anything away from Washington. They had an exceptional year, and I was high on them from the jump. I believe that when you look at all of the offensive personnel returning with what was being retained and what was being added in defensively, it wasn't going to be a perfect showcase, but it should be enough to at least get you by and make it to the college football playoff. And they drastically exceed expectations, supplanting their foot on full throttle, being able to beat up on Texas in the Sugar Bowl. But that's neither here nor there. The problem was this was a defensive line that I always felt was never going to be able to get pressure. So you had to have your linebacker step up and add in a little bit more of an impact. When you saw a pulling guard, when you watched a running back cut left instead of right, when you saw a tackle close the gap, they had to be able to fill that void immediately. That way, they were able to take away one part of the offense. And slowly but surely, it happened, but not before Donovan Edwards decided to go ham and run it for 48 yards and set the tone with a 47-yard touchdown. And then he does it again a couple plays later, where it now is 14-0 with a 46-yard run. At one point, Michigan was averaging 19.6 yards per carry. They were the enforcer, just like they have been all year, just like they had been against teams like Penn State, against teams like Maryland, against teams like Rutgers. Except this time it was on the biggest and brightest stage, and it could have been in the very last game of a college football era that features Jim Harbaugh mentioned with it. But I digress from the situation. This was a moment where you trusted what your MO was. We're physical, we know how to punch, and we know how to bully. And that was the game plan. And it worked. It worked from the very jump. But then you did catch on if you were Washington. And Washington started to find a little bit of an inertia. They forced a couple of 3-and-outs. The defense really stepped up in the second quarter. They ended drives by forcing punts. They got a big fourth down stop. The big play that I thought was going to be the game changer. And this is where I really started to believe Washington can come back. Washington can hold their own. It was when you saw the timeout by Jim Harbaugh, and he calls his players to the side, and it looked like it was going to be a fake punt. And Washington was prepared, so they send the offense back out there. But instead of it being a fake punt, they go out and it's a big fourth down stop. And then Jalen McMillan, Michael Penix Jr. is able to start moving the ball. Big time games from Jack Westover. I was very impressed with what he was able to do, constantly finding avenues to keep the offense moving, keep the sticks driving, find ways just to pick up first downs and not lose the momentum. And then you find Jalen McMillan at the back of the end zone. And there, once again, I truly believe that we would have had a completely different opinion of Washington this year if we saw what Jalen McMillan was able to do. What really was impressive about Michigan in this game was, there are three receivers standing in on that sideline or on the field at any given moment that all are going to hear their names called by Roger Goodell at some point in the not so distant future, whether it be a first round pick, whether it be a second round pick, and they're all going to make impacts at the next level. And you have Will Johnson on one sideline. Will Johnson is arguably, in my opinion, next year's number one cornerback. In fact, I will just pencil it in right now saying that when we talk in NFL draft circles and I go to the NFL Combine this year and I meet up with some scouts, I will hear Will Johnson's name get brought up as CB1 next year. But it was the way that everyone else kind of corralled Jalen McMillan, how they just blanketed Jalen Polk, how they were able to contain the deep ball. And there really wasn't that big time throw that we're so used to seeing from Michael Penix Jr., where the game is flipped on its axis in a 180 motion because of we just know how lethal he is when he gets his opening. And it just didn't feel like there was an opening. It was a lot of dink and dunk passes. It was a lot of short to intermediate throws. They basically, Jesse Minter took away the entire operation of what was Washington's best game plan. Their ace in the hole, their trap card, the one that says game over. They took it away. It was all about keeping things in front of them. And they never baited. They never felt like there was an opportunity. One play, honestly, was the only moment where you felt like this secondary allowed Michael Penix Jr. to win. And Michael Penix Jr. missed the throw. That was plain simple. This is a game that I think that a lot of people will have hindsight 2020 mode. I mean, not hindsight 2020. They'll have a lot of immediate bias because they'll just hear about Michael Penix Jr. going for, 27 of 51, 255 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And they'll say, this is the guy that you thought was going to win the Heisman? This is the guy that you thought was going to be a difference maker for a team? Well, case in point, he was. Since he set foot in Seattle working with Kalen DeBoer, as good as he has been, as good as Kalen DeBoer has been as a head coach, you got to remember, that same record is attached next to Michael Penix Jr.'s name. So whenever we talk about 25-3 in the history of a 2-year span down in Seattle, Washington, you don't just say it with Kalen DeBoer. You say it with Michael Penix Jr. This was a guy that led the college football and the FBS back-to-back years in passing yards. This was a guy that had a completion percentage of over 65%, over 68 touchdowns, not to mention however many he rushed for, a passer rating of over 162 during his 2-year span, and was a Heisman finalist. There was reasons why this guy could have won the award. And I get it. Jalen Daniels absolutely deserved it. And I'll say this right now. The one thing you don't want in college football is your quarterback to get hot. The one thing that you don't want is one of the most lethal men with a ball in their hands to finally catch that spark. And there are 3 quarterbacks this year that you never want to see that happen with. Number 3 was Bo Nix. Number 2 was Michael Penix Jr. And number 1 was Shaden Daniels. And credit where credit's due. After halftime, that was the moment where you thought maybe Washington was going to start to gain ground. This was where they're coming off of a game-changing drive, finding the back of the end zone, getting in the touchdown, and slowly but surely they get the big pick. And who was it? Will Johnson stepping up, making sure that this was a play that everyone would remember. And then comes the fourth quarter, and you finally see Michigan starting to gain steam. Yes, the officiating is going to be completely under watch, and for good reason, because of a lot of people are going to have questions about certain holding calls, and there were bad calls on both sides. I mean, you look right now, especially at the the third down call by Michigan, there was a hold. I didn't see a hold there, but then you look against Washington, there was a hold there, and it wasn't called, and instead, Colson Loveland has the biggest play of the night that eventually sets up Blake Corum running it in, finally cementing his status as RB1 in the history in Ann Arbor, and they start to gain the momentum. Then Michael Penix Jr. starts driving the ball. You think that this is the opportunity. They have to go for it on fourth down. And slowly but surely, another interception sets them up inside the red zone. And once again, you call on number 2 as your number 1 answer to score 6 and seal the game. That is exactly how this game went. It was a palindrome, plain and simple. Start red hot Michigan, end red hot Michigan. And now Jim Harbaugh can say he won a national title. For Washington, this is going to be a very tough pill to swallow because of, I think, so many people watched as this team just completely defied the odds. They lived and breathed by the underdog mentality the entire season. They carried themselves as if they did not care about what anybody said about them, what anybody thought about them, what anybody believed about them. They beat to their own drum and they did not listen to the outside noise. And how fitting would it have been on the biggest stage against a Big Ten team, a future rival that they will actually play next season, for them to be able to march into NRG Stadium and show them the door and say, hey, welcome to the party. You're not ready for us next season. I think a lot of people thought that that was going to be it. They felt disrespected throughout the entire year, and they should have felt disrespected because every single time you turn on a television screen or a YouTube show, all you heard from national pundits, besides yours truly, of course, this is the week where Washington loses. This is the week where Washington comes back to reality. This is the week where Washington finally falls apart. It was against Utah. It was against Oregon State. It was against USC. It was against Oregon. It was against Oregon a second time. It was against Texas a week ago. All you heard from national people across the country. This is where Washington comes back down to reality. And I think a lot of Washington fans wanted people to pick against them again. But you have to realize this was a special season, and it started back last April when you realized Ryan Grubb wasn't going anywhere. You weren't losing Michael Penix Jr. You had a cast of receivers coming back. You had countless new names joining the party that were going to follow the tone set by Kalen DeBoer, and you had the right coach. Once you get the right coach in the building, that's what makes a premier job. People talk all the time about Alabama and Clemson and Georgia and these programs that are known for having exceptional coaches or coaches who are renowned for their style. What makes the program elite is the coach. And then once that coach establishes the identity, the program becomes an elite job. Once you get that guy, everything else becomes easy because the culture is set in place and the tone is set and the practice schedules are set and everyone knows what it takes. And right now, you're losing so much of that talent going into next year. It's a big question mark. We don't know what Washington's going to be in the Big Ten. We have no idea what any of these teams are going to be next season. But at least when you look at a team like Ohio State, or you look at a team like Michigan, or you look at a team like Penn State, you know what's being retained. When you look at a team like Oregon, they've added in so many different pieces, veteran talents, to where you think that they will at least be competitive next year. But you don't know what you're going to get with Washington as Will Rogers from Mississippi State takes over for Michael Penix Jr. It could be a very similar offense, up-tempo, go, moving around the box, seeing a lot of deep shots, but it won't be to Rome Odunze, and it probably won't be to Jalen McMillan. And Jalen Polkey may or may not come back. So you have questions at those spots. So this just felt like a bittering moment in a successful year that will be forever talked about in the history in Seattle. This was a team that won more games than I think that anybody ever expected. This was a team that many people counted out from the jump. And this was a team that won the very last Pac-12 title. Like, as long as these people live and breathe and walk amongst us, they will be able to say, I have the last Pac-12 title ring. I had the last chance to hoist up that trophy in Las Vegas. I did that. And so it's a special year, but it's a heartbreaking moment because so many things could have gone right. You got to give a lot of credit to the defense. The way that they were able to step up, especially in the second and third quarter, and force a lot of 3 and outs. I mean, neither one of these teams was good on third down. One team finished 2 of 14. The other team, 1 of 10. Both teams finished with 16 first downs. One team finished with 301 yards. One team rushed for 303. Like, that's really what this comes down to. You had so many missed opportunities by this offense, and the defense gave and gave and gave. And it just felt like the explosiveness, you thought it was finally going to reach its impasse. I even said on an earlier video, I thought this was going to be a game where the countdown clock hit 0 and you were just going to watch a complete and total explosion unfold for 3 hours at NRG Stadium. And you didn't get it. And unfortunately, it's a heartbreaking, kind of bittersweet moment for Husky fans everywhere. But this was a team that many people said fourth in the Pac-12. Instead, they finished with the most ranked wins in college football this year, number one passing attack in college football this year, a Heisman Trophy worthy performance from a quarterback almost every single week, a legitimate Biletnikoff performance every single week from a wide receiver who's probably going to go top 10, and they have the right coach. So there's at least optimism as they make the jump to the next conference. And as for Michigan, this just feels like the culmination of 3 years. This feels like where the entire state and the city itself of Ann Arbor can exhale knowing that they finally have overaccomplished and overcorrected, and more importantly, just simply defeated the internal process. This was a team that the last 2 years shot itself in the foot once they got to this stage. Once they made it past the Big Ten and once they claimed the title in Lucas Oil Stadium, this was a team that always found a way to fall for self-implosion. And they finally didn't do that. You watch as JJ McCarthy didn't have a great game, but when you need a big play, number 9 stepped up. Definitely not the number 9 I thought was going to be stepping up, but he didn't. He made a big play. He picked up the pace. He wasn't afraid to run it. Great game planning from Sharon Moore, and we'll get to him in a second. But I think when you look at the way that how many of these players came back, you look at how healthy this team was, and you watched as unsung heroes kind of step up and deliver in critical moments. Donovan Edwards was a name that I thought was actually going to be a huge factor during the regular season. He was very minuscule. And then on the biggest and brightest stage, here he comes, number 7, just like he did last year down in Glendale, Arizona. Zip, zap, and zopping his way through defensive lines and simply finding his way through a crowd of white and into the end zone. Like, that's what you wanted. Colson Loveland. I mean, you did not see him have a big-time game last week against Alabama, but against Washington, probably the most biggest play of the night that helped set up a big run from your number 1 running back and the number 1 running back in the history in Wolverine football. Your defense, it did its job. Wilt Johnson, big-time interception. You saw Mike Standstill have another big-time interception. All of these players corralled the field, and they took down this offensive line, the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. That just is a testament. They really were battle-proofed throughout practice, and it doesn't matter what you want to say when it comes to how their schedule was or what they went through or who they battled. They handled business against Alabama, and they handled business against Washington. This was a team that was more than deserving when it comes to winning a national title, and they earned their stripes. Now, let's get to the part that I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about real fast. Michigan and the sign stealing scandal. You can't separate the two. They basically are biscuits and gravy at this point. And when you take the gravy off of the biscuits, it gets really soggy and you don't like it. It's just one and the same. Here's the thing. Whether or not the NCAA does decide on all the infractions, you know what's not going to change? The fans. You know what's not going to change? The strike that. Let's go back. You know what's not going to change? The administration. You know what's not going to change? The halls inside of Ann Arbor. You know what's not going to change? The banners that hang inside of the practice facility or inside the stadium. They're not going to go anywhere because the fans are still going to treat this like it is a national championship, because it is a national championship. And you can talk about the sign stealing scandal all you want. It happened. Connor Stallions, they're going to throw him a party just like Jordan Belfort did in the movie The Wolf of Wall Street once his guy got out of prison. I always forget his name. But anyways, that's going to happen. Who cares? You know what it is? They won the national championship, and they won because they were a great team. Anybody who wants to argue that sign stealing played a factor down the stretch against their 3 toughest opponents, Ohio State, Alabama, and Washington, you're sadly mistaken. It isn't. And so, as long as that reigns, that's what's going to be remembered by those who bleed the maize and blue. That's what's going to be remembered by those who actually embrace the culture that is set up in Ann Arbor. That's going to be what's represented by every single fan who has waited since 1997 to see the confetti fall and their team being stuck in the middle, waving the banner that says national champions, holding up the newspapers like Alabama has, like Florida has, like little brother Ohio State has. They're going to hold on to this and harbor this feeling for as long as possible. And so you can never take this away from them. You can take it away in the grand scheme of things, but they took away wins from Brian Kelly. You know who still is considered the winningest coach at Notre Dame? Brian Kelly. They took away Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy. You know what I still say? Reggie Bush won the Heisman. There are people out there who are going to treat it that way. Yes, the sign stealing scandal happened, and it's never going to go away, and it will always be a blemish attached next to Michigan's name. But do me a favor, really look at this Michigan team. The physicality, their ability to force their way into the backfield, their pressure rate, their manipulation in coverages, their ability to strike fast, their physicality, their strength, their aptitude. This is a team that could win a national title. Plain and simple. There's no other way to put it. They, yes, cheated. We can go ahead and throw that in there. I absolutely believe that they did. But to say that this was a team that couldn't win a national title, you are drinking some fine cough medicine. And if you want to pass it over here, I'm getting over the flu. I would love to be able to have it. But this is a national championship winning team. And it's an elite team because they embraced exactly what they were good at and they never steered opposite. They took in stride what they thought was their best game plan. And every chance they got to strut their stuff, they did so. The only difference was that in the fourth quarter, they got a few passes off when they could have ran it and ran it and ran some more. Because at one point, it didn't look like Washington was going to be able to stop them. And they were going to cry, we all the way home. Now, before we get on out of here, Jim Harbaugh. There's going to be a lot of speculation that this was his final game. Here's the thing. If it was his final game, you're in very good hands if you're Michigan. I don't know if you will be back at this level next year when the national championship unfolds in Atlanta, Georgia. I don't know if you will be back at this level against another team like a Washington or an Oregon with a new head coach. But if you do lose Jim Harbaugh, you're in great hands. You don't need a committee of fans and boosters to tell you what you already have the answer to. He locks 3 doors down. He knocks on the door and says, hey, Sharon Moore, I just want to say your office is waiting down there. Congratulations. Welcome to being the head coach at Michigan. That's the only game plan you need. Washington finished with 301 total yards of offense. Michigan ran for 303. They outgained Washington on the ground. And it was game planning and it was manipulation and it was timing when it came to the tempo. It was great versatility when it came to utilizing the motion in favor to keep Washington guessing. It set up everything. And this is a man who led your team to 4-0 en route to getting you to 15-0. That's the job. Plain and simple. You don't need a whole college football committee to tell you that the person in line that's supposed to take over is already calling shots. And good for an offensive lineman to go ahead and finally get to run the show. We do not respect offensive linemen in the same way we respect defensive backs and and wide receivers and quarterbacks and positions of old. But we got to start respecting offensive linemen. And Sharon Moore called a perfect game that truly is part of the reason why we are talking about Michigan being the victors. And as for Jim Harbaugh, if he wants to go, what else does he have to prove? Man got you to 3 back-to-back undefeated regular seasons. Man got you to 3 Big Ten titles, and the man finally has ended the drought that has been wavering and hovering over the heads of everybody who bleeds maize and blue. He got you here. He got you to the finish line. And now, if he wants to go on to bigger and grander things, he wants his shot at finally winning a Lombardi trophy. He wants to be the next Pete Carroll. You can't really blame him. He did exactly what he was set out to do. Come back and make Michigan dominant. And at this point, when you look at Michigan, you talk about Michigan, you talk about the future of what Michigan's all about, you know that this is the standard in the Big Ten. Physicality, fundamentally sound, beat you until you beat us. That's our game plan. We will beat you until you beat us. And it seems like right now, after 15 straight games, not many people are going to be able to beat Michigan going into 2024. In fact, you can make a case that depending on what returns, they're looking back and going for a second round. That's exactly the way that I feel about this. But there you have it. Michigan walks away victorious 34-13. Washington, hell of a season. I was wrong. Gonna admit it. I was right because I did pick Michigan at the start of the year, but I was wrong because if I did pick Washington in this game, I'm sure there will be a ton of reactions, but make sure you hit the subscribe button down below. Make sure that you comment and tell me your favorite parts of this game. Tell me about what you want to see in the future for this channel, especially going into the off season because there's a lot of content that we have to do, but I'm excited. We'll be back tomorrow to break down a lot of other things, especially what went wrong for Washington, what went right for Michigan, our final top 10 predictions for 2024, our final top 10 rankings for 2023, and an early look going into 2024. But I'm Cole Thompson. Have a good night and hail to the victors. Jim Harbaugh, tip my hat to you.